Let me begin by giving away the ending of the movie. You are going to end up like this, dead. As am I. And then? What happens then? There are many, many, many answers to that question. But what if I told you that you have the answer? What if I told you that you are the answer? After more than 30 years of lecturing at university, that statement still manages to furrow the brows of perplexed students. Yes, you are the answer to the question of what happens to us after we die. And for that reason, I will be pleased to share with you, you do not need to fear death. Hence the name of the website, Fear Not Death. Now, how do the pieces of that puzzle come together? Given that we are now past the point of no return when it comes to the TikTok attention span, I bid that demographic good riddance. For the rest of you, an appreciation of this fact. We are at the very end of a process that began thousands of years ago. A process, or more accurately, the processes that have attempted to answer the question of what happens to us after we die. Therefore, our interaction with that subject matter must recognize and must respect all that which has brought us to this place. My decades of university-based lecturing include multiple sections of a course I designed entitled Dying, Death, and the Afterlife. That course examines how, for thousands of years, the major world religions, representing billions of believers, have answered the question relative to what happens after death. No small undertaking on a topic that everyone will deal with at some point in their life. What you can expect from this website was provided to you by way of the very first image that greeted you after you hit enter. Yours truly in the cemetery. I am seated beside a tombstone with a decidedly different design. In a cemetery with 50,000 plus tombstones that more or less conform to each other, that tombstone stands out. Its message is of a different nature. Its message is a different perspective. That tombstone is what will greet you every single time that you visit this website, because it is what I will be providing you with, a different perspective. A perfect segue to provide you with a working example of a different perspective in action. For that example, we consider two of the world's major religions, just two, Christianity and Islam. If you were to do a quick online search, and by all means, please do, you will discover that those two religions alone represent more than half of the world's total population right now. More than half. To the question of what happens to us after we die, those two major world religions teach that every single person who has ever lived, including you, will spend their eternity in heaven or in hell. What billions currently believe. But their answers to the question of what happens to us after we die reveal how inaccurate their answers are to the question of what happens to us after we die. We come full circle back to you, because you provide the means to prove that their answers are inaccurate. Here is how, and here is why. You had a beginning. You were born, you have lived, stuff has happened, and eventually you will end. That is, you will die. Beginning and end. You are a microcosm to the macrocosm. You are the little picture to the big picture. The big picture, all of life, is a massive, expanded version of the little picture, your life. Your individual story is the means by which we can and should interpret the stories that inform your story and every story. Again, the two major world religions, Christianity and Islam. Just as you had a beginning, so did they. Islam began approximately 1,400 years ago. Their teachings on what happens to every single person after they die have been taught since that time. There were no teachings of Islam 1,500 years ago because there was no Islam 1,500 years ago. Christianity began approximately 2,000 years ago. Their teachings on what happens to every single person after they die have been taught since that time. There were no teachings of Christianity 2,100 years ago because there was no Christianity 2,100 years ago. You had a beginning, and before you began, there was no you. Islam had a beginning, and before Islam began, there was no Islam. Christianity had a beginning, and before Christianity began, there was no Christianity. Moments ago, I stated this with regard to Christianity and Islam, and what I said applies to all of the major world religions. I said this: their answers to the question of what happens to us after we die reveal how inaccurate their answers are to the question of what happens to us after we die. This because all of their answers have a beginning. Capital T truth does not have a beginning. That's what makes capital T truth capital T truth. I can rephrase that conundrum this way. The problem is that the planet is currently populated with billions of believers who, get ready for it, believe that what they believe has always been. But nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing could be further from the facts. As promised, a different perspective. Are you beginning to appreciate how you help to explain the answer of what happens to us after we die? My brain looks at life, it looks at history, all of history, in a linear fashion. History, big picture, is just like history, little picture, you. History is full of beginnings. The beginning of your history, the beginning of the history of religion. You had a beginning. Every single religion in the history of our planet had a beginning. More on that in the next video that I will encourage you to view, which is called Beginnings. Hold that thought among your thoughts that may include who this chap is, and more importantly, why anything he says is worth listening to at all. The very thoughts I would encourage you to have. The subject matter of dying, death, and the afterlife is one that has fascinated me for decades, and my entire adult life has been dedicated to the study and the teaching of the same at the university level. This is not a pedestrian exercise in navel gazing. What this website will provide you with is the means to engage the subject matter at its very essence, at its very core, and to do so with the benefit of historical perspective, with a difference. The major world religions teach that there is a life after death. I am going to challenge what the major world religions teach based on what they teach. A different perspective. Let me put as fine a point on it as I can. The major world religions all ask you to accept what they teach based on faith. What none of the major world religions do is to teach you how to critique them on what it is that they are teaching you. I will. And I will do so utilizing their teachings to teach you that what they are teaching you must be challenged based on their teachings. Take a step back and consider this on an individual level. Through no fault of our own, we are products of our environment. At least that is how we all begin. What your parents did not do over the course of the first few decades of your life was to sit you down on a regular basis and say, your options are as follows. Hinduism teaches fundamental concepts that include karma and samsara, which Buddhism did keep while rejecting other key teachings of Hinduism, such as, and similarly with religions out of Asia, and similarly with the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, leading to this statement, never heard. And you, my lovely child, should know all of these teachings so that you can make the decision that is best for you based on all of these teachings. If your parents did do this with you, to you, and for you, then go and buy a lottery ticket right now, because the odds of this having happened to you are exponentially greater than the odds of winning the big one. If you are facing Mecca 5 times a day, then I can tell you why you are facing Mecca 5 times a day. You are a product of your environment. If you are not facing Mecca 5 times a day, then that which you do participate in on a regular basis, whatever it is also because you are a product of your environment. Through no fault of our own, we are products of our environment. At least that is how we all begin, unless you won life's lottery. This website is designed to engage those beginnings specific to dying, death, and the afterlife, and this with a goal to understand what it is that humankind has come to believe over the millennia, and why humankind came to believe that, which will then position us to address the quintessential question of what role those beliefs should have for us in the 21st century, if any at all. In terms of next steps, I will make this suggestion to you. Over my right shoulder is the menu for the website. Proceed through that menu in a descending order, and as such you will notice the entry WE, which stands for Working Examples. The first working example demonstrates exactly what you can expect. We will read biblical texts, and we'll start with biblical texts and move on to other texts, but we're going to start by reading biblical texts absent interpretation that, as presented in their current form, constitute multiple inconsistencies that will have you asking why you have never noticed this before, especially if you are a believer. Remember, absent interpretation. As important as that working example is, do not begin there. Instead, begin at the item entitled Beginnings. Begin there because everything has a beginning. This is our beginning. That first item, the video Beginnings, is a very thorough and carefully constructed introduction. It's rather serious because the subject matter is serious. The length of the video reflects this, together with an anticipation of and answer for your questions relative to what my qualifications are, who you are, what we will engage as we address a subject matter that affects all of humankind. And finally, not just what we will engage, but how we will engage that process. The website is comprised of sections that interact with each other. Each of those sections is designed with a purpose, so that materials relevant to that section can and will be added. Each of those sections provide you with substantive information. As those sections grow, so does your access, and all of that access is my gift to you. Once I have gained your trust, then and only then will I bilk you out of large sums of money, as all religious charlatans do. No, take me for a test drive. Unlike religious charlatans, with me, there are no commitments, no obligations, no high-pressure sales pitches, no harassing follow-up emails, and no threat of eternal damnation if you come to conclusions other than mine. And almost everything on this website, both now and as I add to it, is available to you at no cost. If your desire is to learn, then this website will facilitate that process in great quantity and again, at no cost. If you only wish to dip your toes into the investigatory water's edge, then that option is very much available to you in terms of accessing a great deal of information at your pace. If you wish to delve deeper into the primordial waters of discovery, then that opportunity is also available and will be provided through the live sessions. And yes, for that there is a cost. In the live sessions section of the website, there is an opportunity for you to take that deeper dive if you so choose. The live sessions section is divided into series and singles. The singles are exactly that. Single sessions on one-off topics that you can opt into for access to a live session with me that is approximately 1 hour in duration. The series are multiple sessions that provide a focused development on the building blocks that you already have access to by way of all the other sections of the website. The website is designed as the ultimate test drive. You have access to a great deal of information. Once you have surveyed any or all that is available, you can decide if you like the way my brain works and you like the different perspective that I bring. At that point, you can decide if you wish to participate in the live sessions. Again, if you want to take that for a test drive, start with a single. If you wish to learn, then I will support you in that endeavor. My goal is not to change what you believe or what you do not believe. My goal is not to have you think the way I think. My goal, as I tell my students every single year, is to facilitate the process of thinking. To change the way we think about everything by changing the way we look at everything. A different perspective. The purpose is not so much that we come to the same conclusion, but rather so that we each come to our own conclusion based on our own critical examination of whatever it is that we are examining. As I tell my students when we are finished our time together, you will never look at anything the same way again, whether that is a bumper sticker or the back of a cereal box, a billboard, a respectful workplace policy, a collective agreement, or a scriptural text, regardless of which scriptural text it is. To change the way we look at everything. To challenge ourselves as to why we believe what we believe. If you love to learn, then this website will support that. The beginnings video concludes by offering you something that every single religion, with alarming and unacceptable consistency, does not offer its believers. The means to critique that which it is asking you to accept by faith. In other words, a proof of process that is self-critical. For that reason, a foundational principle of this website is critically examine everything. And by way of acceptable consistency, not only will that apply to what we are investigating, but it will also apply to me. For that reason, the very first image that will greet you every single time you come to this website is that tombstone that represents a different perspective. The realization that this is how every journey ends is well documented. 1,400 years ago, Islam began to offer its explanation. 2,000 years ago, Christianity began to offer its explanation. Centuries before that, Judaism began to offer its explanation. 4,000 years ago, well before the Old Testament was written, the Epic of Gilgamesh offered its explanation. That text informs us that when the gods created man, they allotted to him death, but life they kept for themselves. This is, after all, what gods do. Also well documented is the frustration and even anger due to the fact that death is the fate of every single person. Approximately 2,500 years ago, an account was written by a man who described himself as among the very wisest men of the time and as the wealthiest man of the time. Notwithstanding these autobiographically provided details of a privileged life, his existential angst about death was rife. And he communicated this with a passion that pours off the pages because of the realization that when he dies, he must leave everything to those who come after him. And he admits that he has no idea who this is going to be, and he openly acknowledges that they may be idiots. It's great reading. It's in the Bible, first 2 chapters of Ecclesiastes. Death and explanations for death supersaturate history, to which the timeless truism embodied in these wise words, only a fool could be in love with death. Words penned 2,500 years ago by the Greek poet Sophocles. I am not in love with death, but on the topic, it has my full attention. I will conclude by asking you to answer not 1, but 2 history of religion questions that you can answer. That you can answer correctly, that you can answer factually. Ready? 1,500 years ago, how many Muslims were facing Mecca 5 times a day? Exactly 0. Today, every day, a staggering number of Muslims face Mecca 5 times a day. But 1,500 years ago, there was not a single Muslim on the planet facing Mecca 5 times a day because there was not a single Muslim on the planet. Second question, second history of religions question that you can answer. 2,100 years ago, how many Christians were partaking in the Lord's Supper, in communion, in the Eucharist? Exactly 0. Today, every day, a staggering number of Christians partake in that sacrament. But 2,100 years ago, there was not a single Christian on the planet participating in that sacrament because there was not a single Christian on the planet. These are facts relative to Islam and Christianity. These are facts and not opinions. These are facts and not interpretations. And those facts change how we look at belief. Those facts change everything. A different perspective. At the beginning of this video, I said that I was going to give away the ending of the movie, and that as it relates to your life and mine. We are all going to die. That is how every movie called life ends. And by way of your life, by way of your beginning, we have given away the ending of another movie. The fear of death has been created in large measure by religion. Religion has been providing that kind of an answer for a very long time. Religion has taught us about the end. What religion has conveniently failed to teach us as part of their teachings is that every single one of their teachings had a beginning. That is why you need not fear death. That is a fundamental underpinning of this website. If religion has a beginning, and it is a fact that every single religion does, then what religion teaches must be challenged. If you are interested in beginning a journey relative to that quest, then this website provides you with the means to begin that journey. Within the magnitude of history, there are innumerable reminders of our temporal status. In this cemetery alone, well over 50,000 reminders. History is all around us. We are merely passing through it. Our lives are a moment in time. I want to make the most of that moment. That, like everything else in life, requires a beginning.